Hey, Alicia Novin here, and today I wanted to give you 8 things that you should try to be able to do in SQL. Here we go. SQL and databasing happen to be one of my most favorite technologies, and I think it's because it's very logic-based and it's all about data manipulation. You can't build an entire application with SQL alone, but it's really important to know how to use SQL properly because it drives the most interesting parts of your application, which is the data behind it. So here are 8 things that I think you need to do to be comfortable in SQL. Here we go. This one isn't just as easy as writing a select statement. Hopefully you already know how to do that. That's not really what I wanted to focus on with this one. Instead, I wanted to focus on ways that you can leverage selections. You should know that you can be able to insert using a select, update and delete using select statements. But really what you should also be able to do is select a select from selects where select is in a select. You can use selections just about anywhere in its own select statement. And that just goes to the power of how you can actually use SQL in really, really interesting and important ways. When it comes to joining multiple tables together, there can be a ton of depth to choosing the right kind of join to use. You don't want to always default to just using an inner join. There are times when a left outer join might actually make more sense despite the fact that it might have some speed performance issues. So you want to consider that and really think through what is the end data and how does it get represented when you're choosing what join to use. And also know that when you're joining, you don't have to explicitly join to a table. You can join to a select statement because selections always return tables. And you also want to know what happens when you join a one-to-one kind of relationship versus a one-to-many relationship or a many-to-many relationship. Know how to join a table to itself and know that while this isn't exactly a join, there are times when you might want to actually use a union instead. So knowing what a union is and how to use a union can be really helpful. In SQL, you can actually do quite a lot of just basic level coding in your SQL statement. And I mean things like arithmetic and converting strings to ints and dates and vice versa. You can cast from one type to another. You can use switch statements and conditions, substring and other types of string manipulations and paddings. All of these types of things are all possible in SQL right within a select statement. And that's really helpful and useful because what that means is you don't have to always rely on your code to then manipulate the data. You can actually rely on the SQL engine to get the data in the final form that you want before you send it across the wire. One thing I really like about SQL is that every decision that you can make comes with a bit of a trade-off. And so you want to balance those trade-offs against your actual use case. In some cases, you might want really fast lookups, whereas other cases you want really fast insertions into your tables or updates. You might have a ton of database relationships, or other cases you want a very non-normalized flat structure. Knowing how to effectively use keys, indexes, and constraints is really helpful when you're tailoring your database schema to suit your needs. Too many indexes and your insertions become really slow, whereas not enough in the right kind of ways and your lookups become really slow. So you always want to find that right balance. And if you've watched any of my other videos, you'll probably heard that I always stress that you always want to solve a problem to the case that you have, to your specific case. And I think that a good database design only happens when you think through how your app works and then you balance it out, you balance your schema against how that app is supposed to function. I don't want to wade into controversy with this one, but let's just call out that there's some people who absolutely love non-relational, non-normalized databases, and then there's others who absolutely love relational databases. But again, you always want to use the right tool for your need, not your preference. The important bit though is that you should know how to normalize your data and what denormalized data looks like and how you can leverage it for speed. So like so many other things with databasing, you always want to know what those trade-offs are, know why and when to use them, and leverage them to suit your problem. if you've been writing code for a while now, you've probably gotten used to writing functions or methods to do repeatable actions. And stored procedures or stored functions are really helpful in this way when it comes to database technologies. There's a lot of depth to this topic alone and how you can use them, but the key is that it's important to know both what stored procedures and stored functions do. There's a little bit of nuance to each of them, but know both of them because both of them can help you depending on your problem. Anytime you need to rely purely on your code to manipulate data, you're ignoring a huge part of what the database engine can do. So whether you're using Oracle or SQL Server or MySQL, all of them have these underlying components and structures and capabilities so that you can write more optimized queries that better get the data out and into your code so that you don't have to rely on your code to manipulate that data. So you want to know about things like how to use views or temporary tables and pivot tables so that when you're writing your query, you're getting the right kind of data out. You can run into a lot of interesting challenges when you have a database that has a lot of, read and write kind of queries all happening simultaneously. So knowing about volatile data and how to leverage transactions and table locking can be really useful depending on the query that you're writing. Let's just say that you're reading all the records in a database and at the same time you've got queries that are updating some of those records. Depending on your use case, you might want to use table locking or you might not want to lock the tables. You might want to use transactions if you're doing a very large bulk set of actions, or you might want to just run a straight read or straight insert or straight update. So let's just say, for example, that you're trying to get an aggregate amount of users that live in California, and at the same time you've got users who've just moved to New York and they want to update where they live. Whether you use locking or not will change the values that you get back. So again, understanding your use case, understanding what you're trying to get back out of your data is really important. And that's one of the reasons why I love SQL so much, because it forces you to really ask detailed questions about what you're trying to do in your application. So those are the 8 areas that I think are really worth investing time in knowing when it comes to databasing. And there's a ton of other things that are really interesting, like pseudo columns, for example. Those are really helpful to know about, but those 8 things I think are pretty key. And I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you found it helpful. I produce a lot of other videos like this that you're welcome to check out. And I've also started a podcast at increments.dev. And that's more focused on career growth and creating a space where we can ask questions that drive how we want to grow in our technical careers. I hope you'll check it out. It's at increments.dev. You can also find it on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. Thanks a lot.